video we'll study production and costs. The topics we'll discuss will be production function, short run and long run, total product, marginal product, average product, law of diminishing marginal product, law of variable proportions, returns to scale, cost function, marginal cost and average cost. Suppose we are a firm that makes bikes. To produce bikes we need different inputs like labor, machines, land and raw materials. Now all these raw materials are assembled in from factory and then we get the desired output, which is bike, and this is called the process of production. The cost that the firm had to incur for applying these inputs or getting these inputs, which are labor, machines, land, raw materials and various others, this is called the cost of production. Now this final output, which is bike or any other thing that your firm makes, will be sold in the market, and after selling these goods will get some amount that is called the revenue of the firm. Revenue is income generated by selling the output produced. Now what is profit? Profit equals revenue minus cost of production. That will be our firm's profit. In our study we'll assume that the firms are trying to maximize its profit. That is, the objective of the firm is to maximize its profit to the highest level possible. Now let's come to production function. It is a relationship between input used and the output produced. For various quantities of inputs used, it gives the maximum quantity of output that can be produced. Production function determines maximum level of output that can be produced using different combinations of input. The input that firms uses in the production process are called factors of production. For example, it can be capital, labor or technological development. Why technological development is also here? Because considering the technology that's present today, we can produce 5 bikes with the same input, but maybe there can be some advancement in technology in the future that will allow us to produce 8 bikes using the same input that we are using today in our firm, and this will increase the profit for our firm. Now Quant. It is the alternative way of representing the production function. Consider we have two input factors, factor 1 and factor 2. Now the isoquant will be the set of all possible combinations of these factor 1 and factor 2 that will yield the same maximum possible level of output. Suppose we are using x1 level of factor 1 as input and x2 level of factor, which gives us y level of output. Now again, suppose we use x2 level of factor 1 and x3 amount of factor 2, which still yields the same output y. Then these sets of combination of input factors x1, x2, which produce the same output y as input factors x2 and x3, is known as isoquant. The short run. Suppose we have two factors of input, which are labor and cost. In the short run, either one of them has to be remain fixed and only one can be a variable. Suppose if labor is fixed and cost is a variable, labor will be termed as a fixed input and cost will be termed as a variable input, or vice versa. When the labor is fixed, the firm can produce various quantities of output by varying the different level of input of factor 2, which is cost, or vice versa. When the cost is fixed, the firm can produce various level of output by changing the quantity of labor. In the long run, all the factors of production, be it factor 1, factor 2, or any amount of input is a variable. So the firms can produce different quantity of output by varying any of the factors of production or any of the input factors simultaneously or one at a time. It is denoted by Q equals to function x, which is a fixed variable, and x2, which is a non-fixed or variable input. So in total product, the value of output is decided by changing the value of only one of the input while keeping all other inputs constant. This relationship between the output and the variable input by keeping all other inputs constant is known as the total product. Now, average product is defined as total product per unit of variable input x2 while keeping x1 constant. It is denoted by function of x1, x2 and by x2. Keeping x2 is a variable factor, x1 is a fixed factor. Marginal product of input is defined as change in output Q per unit change in input x2. Now the law of diminishing marginal product, it says that if we keep increasing the employment of an input with other inputs fixed or constant, eventually a point will be reached after which the resulting addition to output, that is marginal product of that input, will start falling. Now the law of variable proportions is also a somewhat related concept with the law of diminishing marginal product. It says that the marginal product of a factor input initially rises with its employment level, but after reaching a certain level of employment it starts falling. Now, keeping all other input factors constant and only input factor 1 is a variable which we are plotting against the horizontal axis, and the output is plotted against vertical y-axis denoted by Q, and input denoted by x1. Then the curve will be, as the input rises the output also rises, input rises, output rises, but after a certain level, as the input increases the output starts to decrease. This is the law of diminishing marginal product. Now returns to scale. Constant returns to scale. It states that when proportional increase in all inputs results in increase in output by the same proportion. Increasing returns to scale, IRS. It states that when proportional increase in all inputs results in increase in output by more than the proportion. Decreasing returns to scale, DRS, states that when proportional increase in all inputs results in increase in output by less than the proportion. Suppose we increase the input by 10% and input 2 by 10% and we get the output increase by 10%. So all these are same. That's called constant returns to scale. If we increase input by 10% and input 2 by 10% and we get output increase by 20%, then this is known as increasing returns to scale. If we increase input 1 by 10% and input 2 by 10% and we get the increase in output by only 9%, then this is known as decreasing returns to scale. Now let's come to costs. In order to produce output, the firm has to buy inputs or raw material, for which it has to spend some of its resources, be it monetary. Then this amount that the firm spends to get the input is known as the costs incurred by the firm. Short-run costs are those costs in which one of the factors of production cannot. Suppose we have two factors of production, x1 and x2, and suppose x2 is a fixed input and only x1 can be varied, then such type of cost will be known as short-run costs. Now in more general terms, let's call them capital and labor. Now total fixed cost. Suppose in the above example, capital and labor, capital is the fixed cost, but first the firm has to purchase this capital. It can be land or building or office, anything, but after purchasing it once, it will be fixed for a long duration of time. This type of cost that the firm incurs to employ this fixed input is called the total fixed cost. Whatever the output the firm produces, the cost remains fixed for the firm. Now, total variable cost. The cost that firm incurs to employ this variable input is called the total variable cost. Now, the total cost that the firm will incur is the total fixed cost plus the total variable cost, and this will be the sum total of all the costs that the firm will incur for producing the output in the short run. Now, short run average cost, it is the total cost per unit of output produced. Now the average variable cost, it is the total variable cost per unit of output produced. Short run marginal cost, it is defined as change in total cost per unit change in output, and it is denoted by del total cost, which is change in total cost per unit del quantity change in output. Long run costs. Long run costs are those in which there are no fixed variable. In long run costs, total cost is equal to total variable cost. Long run average cost, it is the total cost per unit of output produced. Long run change in long run marginal cost, it is the change in total cost per unit change in total output. You might be wondering why total cost is equals to total variable cost, because since it is a long run and there is no fixed variable, therefore there is no fixed cost, so total fixed cost equals to 0.